it actually makes it harder to kind of sift through the individuals because you will have a lot of people that apply for your positions. But I think finding the individuals, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but of quality that actually have a good head on their shoulders and are truthful and honest and really want to care for these people, I feel like it's very difficult to find those people and you will not get it right on the first time. And so I think people need to understand that just because you hire your team in the beginning, that's not going to be the same team you have probably in a year or two from now. It's just kind of the nature of the game.
Welcome back to Assisted Living Investing with me, your host, Brett Chotkevys. And I'm here today with my wife and business partner, Laura Chotkevys, and we are talking about hiring a caregiver. So Laura runs the day-to-day operations at our assisted living, Platinum Resort Assisted Living and Memory Care in Georgetown, Texas. If you haven't, you can check us out online. But I wanted to bring her on today to talk through some of the details about hiring a caregiver because it can kind of seem scary. Do these people need to be qualified? Do they need to have certain certifications? How much do you have to pay them? What really is their job? Do they need to be nurses or not? And Laura runs all of these things, interviews, hires, fires, trains our staff, and I want to bring her on as the expert to unpack all of these things for us today. So Laura, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on here with me.
Oh, I'm excited. Let's do this.
All right, fantastic. So I want to clear up some of the misconceptions that are around caregivers. So let's first start by who is the caregiver that you're hiring? Like what experience do they need? What certifications or qualifications? And then can you just unpack who are you looking for? Like an ideal caregiver avatar, who are you trying to find?
So I first want to start off by saying when we got into this, we had no experience in any type of medical field, right? We have real estate experience and that's what we had. So when we first came into this, I was under the assumption that we were hiring medical staff and that all of them had to be medical. All of them had to know all the medical jargon that, gets tossed around. And so I was nervous about that because I didn't know that. But what I came to realize was that that was not the case. Based on the state that you're in, your caregivers will have to have certain qualifications. But in the state that we are in, which is Texas, they just need to be 18. So that was something that was kind of an eye-opener for me, like, oh, wow, they don't need to have like some sort of RN status or anything like that. They can go through the caregiving training, which is fantastic to have, but they don't necessarily need that. So that was something that was a surprise to me and maybe a surprise to you listening to this now. Like, oh, wow, I don't have to have someone who has a medical background. What we specifically are looking for is someone with heart, right? Someone who is honest and has integrity, someone who cares and loves for other people. A lot of times you'll find these characteristics in moms. I think that being a caregiver is, I don't want to say a glorified mom because a mom is already glorified in itself, but it's pretty much a mom role that you're taking on. And so you are overseeing the ADLs, and this is kind of a jargon that gets tossed around in the assisted living field. ADLs are activities of daily living. So you are helping people do things that you do on a daily that you don't necessarily think about. So you don't necessarily think about like getting out of bed and walking over to the bathroom and, brushing your teeth. A lot of those things are mindless things. So if you think about your daily routines when you get up, it's mindless for you, but it's not mindless for them because they need help doing all these things. So getting up out of bed, getting dressed, brushing their teeth, brushing their hair, making their bed, opening their blinds, all the things that you do on your own normally, they now need help with. And so they are doing these things for them. And so they don't necessarily need that medical background.
So all these things, these ADLs, these are non-medical things.
Correct.
This is just the normal day-to-day stuff that I do for myself. Toileting, eating, changing, all those kind of things. They're just essentially, are they usually ladies or are they mixture of men and women? Who you mentioned this avatar about being like a glorified mom. Mm-hmm. So you didn't say dad, right? Is it usually women that you find or how is that broken up?
So it's usually women, but we actually on our staff of 10 caregivers now, we have 2 of them are males. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a female. I think that there are a lot of males in the field who are just as loving and just as caring as any of the females as well. So I wouldn't necessarily, once you see a male come in for an interview, be like, no, kibosh that. No, I don't want them in my house. They actually are fantastic. The 2 males that we have now are just amazing caregivers that love and care for our grandparents in the house.
Okay. So no real requirements, right? That is different for the managers. The managers do have to have some certifications and go through some specific state training. But for here, at least in Texas, the caregivers do not. They just have to be 18 years old and alive. Is that the gist of it?
And a heartbeat, yes. That is the gist of it.
All right. So then your pool of people, right, you can hire is really vast, right? Like you don't have to have vast amounts of experience. You don't have to have vast amounts of training. You just need to find someone with heart. And that's the gist of it.
I think because of that wide pool or wide fish tank of individuals that you will come across, it actually makes it harder to kind of sift through the individuals because you will have a lot of people that apply for your positions. But I think finding the individuals, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, but of quality that actually have a good head on their shoulders and are truthful and honest and really want to care for these people, I feel like it's very difficult to find those people and you will not get it right on the first time. And so I think people need to understand that just because you hire your team in the beginning, that's not going to be the same team you have probably in a year or two from now. It's just kind of the nature of the game.
So you talked about how it's kind of hard to find these people. And so we created our avatar, right? Just like when you make sales, you have a customer avatar. We have a caregiver avatar. So can you kind of elaborate who is the person that we're looking for?
So it can kind of fluctuate between ages, right? I feel like it can be a male or female, and it's usually someone between the ages of 18 and 30 is usually the age, but we've also had caregivers who are older as well and maybe retired and who, or we have people who were past nurses or were past LVNs or caregivers. And so I wouldn't say that our avatar is kind of in this one little encapsulated form of just 18 to 20 or 30. It's someone who has a heart to serve is really what it comes down to. I know you're going to hear us say that a lot. And some people probably are going to question, well, how do you know if they have that heart? We'll talk about that in the interview later. But yeah, so it's someone who is between the age of 18 and 30 who loves and has compassion to help others.
So why is there a gap there? Why did it stop at 30 and pick up again?
Because usually this is their starter job. I think it's one of those jobs that are after you graduate from high school, it's a very easy to enter this job. It's an entry level position. And so which is why you have the wider pool of individuals. And so usually people will graduate and not know what to do with their lives and just be like, oh, well, I'll just try this and see if it's something that I like doing. And so they'll work there for, between 2 to 5 years, and then they'll maybe move on from there. They'll maybe want to say, I want to be an RN, so I want to go to school for that. And so a lot of our individuals, they kind of get their feet wet or their palate wet and be like, oh, I like this and I want to pursue this further. And so usually they'll start with us and then they'll start doing their nursing school and then go through nursing school, even working with us, and then have a point where, they have to quit and then go, on to bigger and grander things in nursing school.
Okay. So that makes sense to me. Then the older people in life, 50s, 60s, this is as their career is winding down and they want more of a less stressful job or more of a part-time job, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of, or it could be moms who are stay-at-home moms and they just want to get out and contribute to the family and also be around other adults, I think is kind of a good way to put it. So there are younger moms who are our caregivers and who are fantastic, but then there's also, like you said, individuals who have retired from their professional life and don't just want to sit around at home. They want to contribute and they want to help. And so usually that's when you see the older ones who are working.
So can you unpack what's the day-to-day routine for a caregiver? What's their job duties?
So kind of mentioned this before with the ADLs, but it's helping with activities of daily living. So I can kind of go through a whole day's worth, like what our schedule looks like, if you think that would help people.
Sure, let's hit it.
So I'll start with 6 a.m. The 6 a.m. staff comes on and they do rounds with the 10 to 6. And if you're not familiar with the term rounds is when you go and you check on every single one of the grandparents in your house and make sure that they're clean and they're dry and they're taken care of, right? That everything is good for that individual. So making sure everyone is clean and dry before the 10 to 6 shift leaves. So you do the rounds. That will usually take around 15 minutes. So on each shift, we have 2 caregivers on. So one caregiver is doing the rounds while the other caregiver is counting medications. So the narcs have to be counted every shift to make sure that they are correctly counted and then nothing's missing. So there's 2 people counting meds and 2 people doing rounds, which takes about 15 minutes. So after the rounds is done, our morning caregivers are pretty much getting ready for the day, right? Making sure the coffee's done, making sure all the breakfast is ready. And then they are slowly getting people up. So we have a shower schedule for each individual. And so they are getting people up, bringing them to the dining room table, making sure they have, coffee and drink and their food. And then the Medtech is then giving the medications at the table at that time. So it's kind of a slow process of getting people up, showering those 2 to 3 individuals who need showers that morning, and then also giving medications. And that's where the team play comes in between those 2 caregivers, making sure they're communicating well with each other. If they need help with anything specifically, they can walkie-talk each other. Hey, I have, number 15. I need to help transfer. Can you, meet me in shower room 2? And so they're making sure that it's a team play, right? So usually that whole process of getting all 16 individuals up is, I'd say, about 2.5 hours. So 2.5 to 3 hours. So they try to be done by 9:30 and 10 o'clock. At that time, they're now on a schedule where they have activities. So they usually run an activity for about an hour from 10:30 to 11:30. And we have a activity calendar that our managers oversee. And then we have a whole closet full of activities. So they're doing pool noodle volleyball. They're doing certain mind games. They're coloring. They're doing karaoke. They're doing all sorts of fun activities. Yeah, they're having fun. And so, this helps with their cognitive ability, helps with their physical function. And a lot of times we have our caregivers run this, but then we also have some outside sources who come and run these activities too. So at 12 o'clock, we have everyone to the table eating lunch. And, our chef is kind of overseeing all that. So he preps all that. And that's a whole nother side topic on its own about the chef. So lunch is about 12 to 12:45. And then at that time, each caregiver slowly takes one person to their room for kind of just quiet time. They could take a nap. They could watch TV or whatever they want, right? And so from 1 to, I'd say, 3:30, they are napping. So in between that time at 2 o'clock, we have our second shift coming in. So our 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. shift is coming in. And it's kind of the same routine of doing the rounds with, one caregiver on one caregiver is doing rounds, and then the other caregivers are counting meds. So it's the same routine as the 6
a.m. You count meds every single shift change, every single day?
You count meds every single shift change, every single day.
That sounds annoying.
It's a lot. Yeah, okay. But you have to with your narcotics. It's just the narcs. It's not the regular medications. Not every single pill. Not every single medication. It's just the narcotics.
Okay.
Yeah, gotcha. Narcotics are double locked in your medication cabinet.
Okay.
So they do that at 2, and then usually from 2 to 3, the 2 to 3 shift is cleaning bedrooms. So we have a whole schedule on cleaning bedrooms. So they are cleaning, there's certain bedrooms for that day. And then around 3 to 3:30, they're getting people up one at a time, bringing them out in the living room, and then you're doing another activity. So it's the same thing. There's an activity calendar, there's an activity closet, just running the activity for the day.
2 activities per day?
2 activities per day. Yeah, that's a minimum. Sometimes we do more if we have volunteers coming in and run the activities. So then around 4:45 or 5 is when dinner is ready. Bring everyone to the table, help with feeding, help with people drinking or whatever they need. And then at, I'd say 5:45 is when dinner's over. And a lot of times people just want to go to bed. So we have certain people who we put to bed. So that's just a normal thing that we go through every night, right? That we do mindlessly, but it's something that they need help with. So getting dressed in your pajamas, brushing your teeth, taking out your dentures or taking off your eyeglasses, making sure that they're in bed, they're comfortable, they're warm, they're ready to sleep for the night. And then some people don't go to bed at that time. They stay up and want to watch TV in the living room, and that's fine. It's their house, right? So a lot of times we'll have one-on-one time with individuals. So it's having conversations, it's chit-chatting. And then around 10 p.m. is when the next shift comes in. Same thing, do rounds, count the narcotics. And then our night shift does a lot of the cleaning and just does 2-hour bed checks around the clock.
Okay. So a couple questions that I want to hit, because you mentioned a Medtech. What's the difference between a Medtech and a caregiver?
So a Medtech in our home in Texas is someone who has been medication delegated by an RN. So we have an RN actually through our hospice company that comes in every month, and she med delegates everyone who has not been med delegated. And it's usually an hour class that they go through talking about the different medications, the side effects, why they take those medications, also talking about different forms of taking medication. So through eye drops, nose sprays, ear drops, or oral pills. So it's pretty much just a brief oversight of the medications that you will be administering to the grandparents in the home. And so that has to be completed. It has to be signed by an RN before they actually can pass medications.
So does this RN, do you have to have them on your staff? And how do you pay them? Is it expensive?
So it's not. I think it wasn't really expensive in the beginning because we actually had to pay an RN to come in. But now we have an individual through our hospice company that comes in, and she's just really sweet. She loves our house, and she actually does it for us because out of the kindness of her own heart. So I think you'll build relationships with people over time. It may cost a little bit up front because you don't have the reputation yet. But once you have a bunch of RNs and hospice companies coming in your home and seeing how fantastic you are, they're going to want to be in there and they're going to want to help you. And so, yeah, we have an individual come in for free.
That's fantastic. I didn't even know that.
Oh, there you go. All right.
I thought we were still paying.
Well, we do every now and again if that individual isn't free.
Okay. So what do we pay? $150?
It's $150 for an hour for them to come in.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. That's not a big deal. It's once a month usually for us?
Once a month.
$150 to have somebody delegated and they can do all the meds.
Correct.
We don't have to have a nurse on staff, on payroll, anything like that.
No, that was another misconception I think that we had when we came into this was that, oh my gosh, we're going to have to pay an RN. Like, not only do we have to pay our managers, we have to pay an RN, we have to pay our caregivers, we have to pay our chef. It was like, oh my gosh, there's going to be so much money in payroll. But no, you don't necessarily have to have someone as an RN on staff. I think it's a plus, and a lot of assisted livings do have that. A lot of the big boxes, I know they have to have that. But us as being a Type B licensure in Texas, you do not have to have that on staff.
Fantastic. So you mentioned having two caregivers and how you have this little powwow and they meet and go through, shift change. Do you think two caregivers are the way to go? Is there times when you need more or less?
So with us, we're a 16-bed licensed home. And with the state of Texas, you have to have, you have 3 people move in initially after you pass your life safety inspection. So after we pass the life safety, which goes over the sprinkler system and evacuations and such, you can have 3 people move in. And so we had 3 people move in, and we had 1 caregiver on for each shift for just those 3 individuals. But we knew that once we got our second health inspection, we knew that we had a lot of people waiting on our wait list that were going to just come in waves, right? It was going to be a big wave of people moving in. So we actually hired a second caregiver prior to, I think, our 4th move-in because we wanted to be sure they were trained, they were ready to handle all of these grandmas and grandpas. So in our experience, we think that around, I'd say 5 to 7 is good for 1 caregiver, but I think you need 2 if it goes above that number. So we currently have 2 caregivers on all shifts around the clock.
Okay, so I know we do this even at night. We have 2 caregivers and they're awake.
Correct.
Now, I know some places, as they're trying to make these numbers work, they won't do 2 caregivers a night. So can you talk about why we chose, because it's not a requirement. We can have 1 caregiver a night. Why do we choose to do it that way?
COVID was an interesting wrench that got thrown in our whole plan because we opened November of 2020. So because of that, I actually ran a lot of shifts. I was a caregiver for a lot of the shifts. And so I had firsthand experience running the shifts on every time, the morning, the evening, and the night. And so I think it really sucked at the time, but I think now looking back on it, I'm really glad that I experienced that because I was able to see from their perspective what they were dealing with. So there actually was one night that I was working with another individual, and man, it was just a night. You'll have some of these shifts that are just like everything that could go wrong happens. And, 3 people got sick, there was vomiting, there was diarrhea, there was all sorts of stuff, right? And then you had one individual who was a 2-person transfer got sick.
What does that mean, 2-person transfer?
So 2-person transfer is you literally need to have 2 people to transfer this individual
because
they're heavy or they're just awkward and stiff or whatever it may be.
Okay.
And so if I was by myself or if someone was by themselves on that shift, they would not have been able to handle it. And so we at Platinum Resort, we want to give the best quality care. And I think having the best quality care is having 2 individuals there in case something happens. If someone falls and 911 needs to be called, if they're not on hospice, what's going to happen with all the other individuals if that person has to sit with that individual in the room until, EMS comes. So there's just a lot of different circumstances and scenarios that could and will happen that you need to have 2 people on.
Yeah. So it's that 10% of the time.
Correct.
When things go wrong, you need a second person during that time.
Yes.
And then ultimately, when you make jobs for these caregivers stressful and hard, they're going to quit.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
just, especially through that whole Great Resignation, it was just no call, no show, right?
Yeah.
Like you had to make work easy for them. And if you had these circumstances where it got stressful because someone fell and then they got 12 other people saying, I need help, I have to go to the bathroom.
Exactly.
They're like, I'm not coming back to this job.
Yeah. Well, that's how it is in a lot of these stinky big box facilities is they have a whole wing to themselves. It's just one caregiver for a wing of 25 individuals. And that's not realistic to give great care. Even if you are the best caregiver in the world, you know how to multitask, you're running the whole time, you still will not give quality of care, taking care of that many people to just one person.
Yeah, that's true. So let me ask you about your interview process. You've done a lot of caregiver interviews. What are you looking for and what is your actual process?
So looking for, again, someone with an open availability, someone who has good conversation skills, right? I think that's an important aspect to have. Someone with heart, someone who you can perceive as being honest. I know it's kind of something that you can't really see in a couple interviews. So that's pretty much what I'm looking for in somebody.
Let me ask you about the communication. That was surprising. I didn't think you were going to say that. Why would you say that?
Because you need to have communication skills to not only communicate to the grandparents in the home, but also communicate effectively to the family members and also the hospice, home health, and nurses that come into the home. And there's also, visitors that come in. There's tours that are being done. We've actually had a few of our caregivers give tours to individuals who come in after hours when our managers aren't there, and they've been able to run a tour. So it's important to have those communication skills because you never know what circumstance they're going to be in.
Okay. So expand a little bit on how many interviews and what the timing's like and when do you decide to hire someone?
Yeah, so we post on the actual job on different aspects or different software programs online. So you can choose whatever ones you want. But we do usually 3-hour blocks of interviews. So after we post the job, we'll tell people to come in, Friday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And so we'll have individuals come in, they'll schedule usually a 30-minute time with our managers. And our managers are fantastic. They're the ones who oversee all of this now. I was the one running it in the very beginning, but now our managers have taken that on. And so, they come in, and I think the first, I'd say 15 seconds of the interview, I think I already know if I'm going to hire this person or not.
Why is
It's
that?
blatantly
What
obvious.
stands out?
It's how first of all, how they dress when they come in. I've had many people come in their pajamas, come in slippers, come in short skirts, low cut things. It's just not the culture that we want to cultivate at Platinum Resort. And so if someone comes in a suit or looking nice, that's obviously a first good tick for me. It's just the visual. You're kind of judging someone in a visual way, which I think we all do, right? I think you should do as a business owner. Secondly, how they engage with me the first time, right? Are they standing up and shaking my hand? Are they staying seated, not giving me eye contact? There's a bunch of nonverbals that you can pick up on that if this is a good fit for you or not. So I honestly know within 15 seconds if I'm going to hire them or not. So I guess if you're a caregiver listening to this, make sure that you come dressed appropriately, that you look the people in the eye, that you shake their hand firmly, and that you're asking them questions too. Because not only is Platinum looking for amazing people, but you as a caregiver coming in for an interview also are looking to see if this is a good fit for you.
Yeah,
so it's a two-way street.
Okay. So is it just one interview? Is it multiple?
So we do multiple interviews because a lot of times we only have one manager on, and I want both of my managers to interview because a lot of times you can ask the same questions, but you'll tend to get a different answer with a different manager. So I want to make sure that there's congruency with both of these interviews to make sure that they say the same thing to the same manager, and to make sure that both my managers really like this individual and think that they'll be a good fit for our culture at Platinum.
Okay. So if you have two people that you're interviewing and you like both of them, but one of them you like because on paper they have great experience. They've, 2 or 3 years worth of caregiving experience, and the other person, no experience, maybe straight out of high school, or they're just a young mom, but they're connecting with you. There's personality. It seems like they're loving and have that role. Which do you prefer over the other?
Personally, I prefer the one with no experience, the one who I connect with, the one who seems like they have a good heart and are a person of integrity. I think that if you hire somebody from a big box or some other facility, they bring all of their bad habits with them. And I think they carry that onto the job when they come work with us. Whereas if someone has not worked in the environment before, or just in general in assisted living, I think they're more open to learning. And so I want someone who is open to learning, can take constructive criticism, and just wants to do the job, right? I think there was one individual that we hired, and she's fantastic. She no longer works with us because she, was pursuing a teaching career. But she had a little pad and a pencil and paper, and she would take notes every shift about each grandparent, like what they like. So she had a page so number 1 was room number 1, and she would write like how she liked to get up, how she liked to get dressed, like her whole, the routine that they liked. And then she also had questions at the bottom. So at the end of the shift, she would be like, okay, I did this, I learned this about this person. They like this, they don't like this, but here I also had some questions about this. And literally it almost brought me to tears. I'm like, wow, you really care about your job, because that is rare. And so looking for individuals like that, right? She had no experience. She had never worked in assisted living before, but she had the drive and she had the heart to learn more. So to answer your question, I would take the person who I connected with more, who I felt like would fit our culture. I think is an important aspect, is fitting the culture. And it doesn't really matter about their experience for me personally.
Okay. So that kind of leads me to the next question is, if you're preferring to hire people with heart that have no experience, what is the onboarding and the training process like, and how long does it take for them to be on their own on the floor?
So this will vary from person to person. We have a 3-day training process. So that's 3 shifts. So 3 8-hour shifts. So a total of 24 hours of working. The first shift is a lot of the paperwork, right? A lot of learning, the abuse and neglect and all the things that you have to learn based on your state regulations. So that's kind of, I don't want to say the boring day, but it's kind of the boring day, I think, for them. They usually shadow the other caregivers on. So I still usually have 2 caregivers on and then have that one person shadow for that first day, just for them to see exactly how things work. Their second 8-hour shift, they are usually doing the work, but I have somebody else shadowing them. So I usually have a senior caregiver that will follow and just make sure they're doing what we want them to be doing and how we want them to do it. And then the third shift, the third 8-hour shift, is usually them on their own, like completely on their own. I usually will have someone shadow a little bit in the background just to make sure they're saying the right things, they're doing the right things in the appropriate way, but they're usually on their own on that. And then after those 3 shifts, we sit down with them and pretty much just like a debriefing on, hey, how is it going? How do you like it? Is there anything you wish you could learn more about? Do you think you need more training time? Because we can definitely provide that to them. It's not something that we're like, okay, perfect, 3 shifts, you're on your own. Like, if you're not comfortable and you think you need more time, then we're more than willing to do that.
So how often do you have people that say they need more time?
Rare, very rare. Yeah, I would say it's only a fraction of the time, of like maybe 5 to 10%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So pretty infrequent.
Yeah.
Do these caregivers, do they think it's hard or complicated to learn these ADLs and go through this stuff?
No, I don't think it's complicated. I think that there's certain techniques that you can learn along the way. I think 3 days of training, you'll get the basis, like your foundation poured, right? But then from there, I think is when you'll get the sticks up and you'll get your house built.
Okay.
It's on the job training is really what it is, right? You'll learn once you actually start doing.
Okay. So they've been onboarded, training for 3 days. Now they're on the floor. They're running the shift themselves. How long do you think it takes if someone's working 5 shifts a week to be like really proficient at this and be able to know all of these kind of things? And then I guess second part of the question, how long until they get med delegated and become a Medtech after that?
So the answer to your first question is I think it depends on their teamwork and their communication, because if you don't have that, it's a little bit harder to work with other people and get the job done in a way that's efficient. So if you have two caregivers on that just really communicate well with each other, doesn't mean they're friends, but they just communicate well, they work well with each other. I think that is really what you want. So you want someone that is open to working with somebody else, team play, right? A lot of times you get people who don't want to work with anybody else, who just want to do it themselves. And I think that's where doing this task is a lot harder. So I would say I'm comfortable with someone being on the floor. I'd say 6 to 8 weeks is when I feel like they've got the job down. If they're not calling in, I feel like I can trust them. I know that they're going to come and show up to their shifts with a good attitude, that there's no drama that's going to be brought in. It takes, I'd say, about 6 to 8 weeks. As far as answer your second question with the med delegation, we usually like somebody to be on, I'd say 8 to 12 weeks before we med delegate them. And I think that's purposeful because we want them to know each of the grandparents before we just kind of throw on the medication with them. And we want to know that they're committed to working at Platinum and that they have a good head on their shoulders to be able to handle the tasks of passing out medications.
Yeah. Okay. So just starting to wrap this up here, is there any other things that you think is important that people should know about hiring caregivers and training them?
So one little thing that I want to add is we have an interview template that we pretty much use every time we hire a new Platinum Angel. So we call them Platinum Angels. Saying caregiver is really hard for me because it's not a term we use in our home. So when we hire a new Platinum Angel, we have the standardized questions, right? And I think that I've changed this so many times throughout the years because I want to be very specific about the questions I ask, because when you ask specific questions, by the answer you get, you'll know if it's right for you or not, if this person is a good fit for your home. So I think the most important question that we ask, and this is going to be maybe surprising to people, is did you provide 2 weeks at the last position that you had? And if people say no, that honestly is almost like an automatic no for me. Like if you didn't have the respect enough to call your last employer and give them a 2-week notice and actually fulfill that 2 weeks, then I feel like you're going to come on board here and you're going to do the same thing. So not only do I ask if they gave 2 weeks, I also ask if they fulfilled those 2 weeks, because you can put 2 weeks in and not actually show up. So that's an important question that I feel like is super important to ask. I also want to get I want to know their personality, right? And so another question that we ask for that is, what are your pet peeves? And also, give me an example of your perfect day off. Because then it tells me if they have a family, it tells me if they have kids, it tells me certain aspects about their personal life that I think is kind of important to know. And so those questions may be silly to people, but it actually tells me a lot about the person, especially pet peeves. Pet peeves is a very interesting question to ask people. Another question we ask is, if we were to proceed hiring you, we would be doing a background check. Is that okay? And a lot of time, in most cases, people say yes. But there is a small percentage of people who will really tell the truth about their background on that question. And so,
meaning like,
which is a good
they'll
thing.
be like, hey, I had a hit and run. Or
No,
I
exactly.
beat up my boyfriend or something.
No, they will be honest. And I think that's great. But then it also kind of saves me time. Like, hey, that's probably not the individual that I think is a good fit for our home. I want my grandparents in the home to be safe, and I want the other individuals in our home to be safe. And so creating that culture, I think, is also another really, really important aspect. I think it's hard to create that in the very, very beginning, right? Like you just started and you're kind of in the struggle bus of like getting the business started. But I think creating that culture that you want for your home is vital to attract certain individuals that are a perfect fit for your home. So I think we have a specific culture within Platinum that attracts certain individuals to us and repels certain individuals to us, which is the whole point, right? We want people who are going to come, who are going to show up, who aren't going to call in all the time, who have a good attitude, who are loving, who are caring, who are loyal and honest. And people who aren't those things, we don't want them in our house. And so it kind of is the reputation around town that is who we are and what we are. And People who don't want that, they don't come for the interview. People who do want that.
That's interesting because you talk about kind of attracting and repelling. So if you get the wrong fit in there, I guess here's the question is how often do you have to fire somebody now when we're stabilized and we have this reputation versus how often did you find the wrong people and you had to remove them when you're first getting started?
So, gosh, I just did not expect this when we first started. I thought I was like I could tell if someone had a true character or not just by the interview. But man, people are really good actors out there. And so there were quite a few people that we knew didn't fit in our culture. And, we had write-ups, we had all the stuff that we were like, we have to get rid of them. They're just not a good part of our team. So we had to fire quite a few people in the very beginning. It's almost like getting rid of that bad apple within your community because one person can really just demolish your entire thing that you've built, right? And so getting that one bad apple out of your home is vital. So in the beginning, it was a lot. I feel like now that we're stable, we don't really have to do that anymore because we've built that reputation and people know what we stand for. And, if you have a bad attitude and you're calling it all the time, like we just don't stand for that. And you can go look for a job elsewhere.
So those people that are doing those kind of things, you will fire them?
Correct.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's fantastic because ultimately this is about providing the best care for our grandmas and grandpas. And these caregivers, they are the front line of defense. They are literally the hands and feet providing this care. And if you have bad attitudes and people who don't want to be there, let's find somebody else.
Exactly. Because there are a lot of people out there who really want the job and who can really do the job so well and provide so much love and care that you want to give them the opportunity to come in your home.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to share this with you, have Laura on to show and kind of unpack that this is not all that complicated. There are a huge pool of potential candidates for you to have caregivers for your business, and they don't have to be ultra qualified and years of experience. You literally are just looking for someone with heart. So I think the core of our success with caregivers is two things. Number one, finding the right caregiver who has dependability and has heart, and two, having systems. We train through all systems. We have 8 different systems that we teach our caregivers, and we bring them through this in a system over these 3 days. We've trained our managers to do those things, and they now do it for us. So it puts Laura and I in a position where we can be working on the business and not in the business. So I want to encourage you, if you are new to this niche, it is not that scary with the caregivers. You just need to find these simple things, people with heart and a great system of training, and then remove the bad apples. So this has been a life-changing business opportunity for Laura and I to make incredible money and to pull our time back and spend time with our kids. So I want to encourage you to do a bigger deal. Do a luxury 16-bed memory care mansion. It's been amazing for us. So I will see you on the next one.